Average once had value because the world moved slowly. There was a time when following the rules, doing what was expected, and staying safely in the middle produced stability. If you showed up, worked hard enough, and didn't make too many mistakes, you could expect a predictable outcome. Education led to employment, loyalty led to security, experience led to progress. In that world, average wasn't a weakness. It was a strategy. But that world no longer exists. The most dangerous assumption we make today is believing that yesterday's rules still apply. They don't. Technology has accelerated everything. Information moves instantly. Markets shift overnight. Skills become outdated in years instead of decades. And yet, many people are still operating with the same mindset their parents were taught. Be safe, don't stand out too much, don't take risks, and you'll be fine. The problem is not that those ideas were wrong. The problem is that they are outdated. The world has changed, but most people haven't. We live in a time where access is no longer the advantage. Clarity is. Everyone has access to the same tools, the same information, the same platforms. What separates people now is not what they know, but how intentionally they use what they know. Average effort blends into the noise. Average thinking gets lost in the crowd. Average results are invisible, and invisibility is expensive. When everything is connected, comparison becomes unavoidable. You're no longer competing with the people in your neighborhood or your city. You're competing with people across the world who are willing to work harder, learn faster, and adapt sooner. Not because they are more talented, but because they understand the reality of the environment they're in a fast-moving world. Standing still feels safe. But standing still is not neutral. It's falling behind. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they underestimate the speed of change. They assume they have time to improve later, time to learn later, time to take things seriously later. But later keeps getting closer, and the gap between where they are and where they need to be keeps getting wider. Change doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock politely. It simply arrives. And those who haven't prepared are left reacting instead of leading. Average thinking is reactive. It waits for instructions. It follows trends after they're proven. It asks what's safe rather than what's necessary. And in a world that rewards initiative, reactivity becomes a disadvantage. Look at how quickly relevance fades. Companies that once dominated industries disappear because they refuse to evolve. Skills that were once valuable become automated. Roles that once felt secure are redefined or eliminated. This isn't a crisis, it's a pattern, and patterns tell us something important. Those who adapt early survive longer. But adaptation requires awareness, and awareness requires honesty. We have to be willing to admit that doing what worked before may no longer work now, that the habits that once produced progress may now produce stagnation, that comfort in familiar routines can quietly become resistance to growth. This is where average becomes dangerous. Average says, this is good enough for now. Average says, I'll adjust when I have to. Average says, I'll wait and see. But waiting in a world that rewards speed means someone else moves first. The people who thrive today are not the ones with perfect plans. They are the ones with clear direction. They don't have all the answers, but they ask better questions. They don't wait for permission because permission rarely comes in times of disruption. They move, learn, adjust, and move again. That mindset is the opposite of average. The challenge is that most systems are designed to produce sameness. Schools reward compliance, organizations reward predictability, social norms reward fitting in. From an early age, we're taught to minimize risk, avoid failure, and aim for acceptable outcomes. And when that conditioning meets a rapidly changing world, it creates tension, because what made you acceptable before may make you replaceable now. This isn't about being the loudest or the smartest. It's about being intentional, knowing why you do what you do, understanding where you're going and adjusting how you get there. Average people focus on tasks. Intentional people focus on direction, and direction matters more than speed. If you're running fast in the wrong direction, you're not winning, you're just getting tired. But if you're clear about where you're headed, even small, consistent steps create momentum. That clarity is what separates those who feel overwhelmed by change from those who leverage it. The world doesn't slow down for those who hope it will. It rewards those who accept reality and respond accordingly. So the real question isn't whether the world has changed. The real question is whether you're willing to change with it. Because average is not a reflection of your talent. It's a reflection of your awareness. When you understand the environment you're in, average stops being an option. Not because you want to be special, but because survival now demands relevance. And relevance requires growth. The people who succeed in this era are not chasing perfection. They are chasing progress. They are constantly learning, unlearning, and relearning. They are curious instead of comfortable. They treat change not as a threat, but as a signal that it's time to evolve. And once you truly understand that the world has moved on, staying average stops feeling safe. It starts feeling risky. Because in a world that never stops changing, the most dangerous place to stand is exactly where you are. Comfort is one of the most insidious enemies of progress. It feels safe, familiar, and reassuring, but that very feeling of safety is precisely what makes it dangerous. Comfort lulls us into thinking that we are protected, that the effort we have already put in is enough, and that tomorrow will look just like today. But the truth is that comfort is never neutral. It is a force that slowly erodes potential, diminishes ambition, and limits what we are capable of achieving. When we seek comfort, we trade growth for ease. We trade courage for convenience. We settle for the predictable instead of reaching for the possible. And because comfort rarely shouts, we often fail to notice the subtle ways it constrains us. It whispers in our ears, telling us to wait, to pause, to avoid conflict, and to follow the path of least resistance. And over time, those whispers accumulate into habits, and habits accumulate into a life that never fulfills its potential. Most people don't recognize the danger because comfort feels good in the short term. It feels like rest, like peace, like security. But it is a false peace, a temporary reprieve that hides a much deeper cost. While comfort is tempting in the moment, it comes at the expense of the future we could have created. The moments we choose ease over challenge, predictability over growth, and safety over courage are moments that shape our destiny, and not for the better. The danger is subtle because comfort doesn't look like failure. You can sit comfortably in a mediocre job, a stagnant relationship, or a routine that drains you and tell yourself that you are fine. You can convince yourself that you are stable, that life is manageable, and that you will do more later. And yet, life rarely rewards fine. Life rewards effort, initiative, and intentionality. It rewards those who are willing to move even when the path is uncertain, who are willing to embrace discomfort because they understand its value, and who refuse to settle for mediocrity simply because it feels safe. Comfort also distorts perception. When you are comfortable, it is easy to confuse ease with competence. You might think that because you are not struggling, you are succeeding. But ease is not evidence of progress. It is evidence of a ceiling, and ceilings are dangerous because they are invisible until you hit them. A comfortable life feels like a plateau, a gentle slope, but what looks gentle often conceals a decline. If you are not pushing yourself, if you are not challenging the status quo, and if you are not intentionally growing, you are falling behind. The real danger of comfort is that it masks complacency. Complacency is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly, disguised as satisfaction or contentment. It convinces us that we are enough, that what we have done so far is sufficient, and that our effort is acceptable. But in a world that rewards constant improvement, complacency is a silent threat. It doesn't kill ambition in a day, it kills it in inches. One small compromise here, one skipped opportunity there, And soon you find that the life you once dreamed of has been replaced by routines that no longer inspire you. Comfort also creates dependency. When we rely on familiar routines, predictable environments, and external validation to feel safe, we become less capable of handling uncertainty. We shrink from challenges, avoid risk, and allow fear to dictate our choices. But growth does not come from safety. It comes from stretching, from experimenting, and from embracing the discomfort of the unknown. The moment we prioritize comfort over challenge, we stop developing the skills, mindset, and resilience necessary to thrive in an ever-changing world. Most importantly, comfort erodes ambition. When comfort dominates our decisions, we stop asking the hard questions. What am I capable of? What could I achieve if I pushed harder? What opportunities am I missing because I'm afraid of the temporary discomfort required to seize them? Greatness does not emerge from comfort zones. It emerges from persistent effort, deliberate discomfort, and the courage to take risks when the stakes are high. And those who choose comfort consistently sacrifice the very potential they claim to want. It is also important to understand that discomfort is not the opposite of happiness. Many people mistakenly equate discomfort with suffering, pain, or misery. But discomfort is simply the tension that exists between where you are and where you want to be. It is the signal that growth is required. Discomfort is a teacher. It forces reflection, sharpens focus, and demands that we stretch beyond the limits of what we know. Without discomfort, there is no innovation. Without discomfort, there is no progress. Without discomfort, life is reduced to repetition, and potential goes unfulfilled. Comfort, in essence, is the slow killer of dreams. It convinces us that small incremental choices are sufficient, that the bare minimum is acceptable, and that mediocrity is a reasonable compromise. And the irony is that it does so while feeling pleasant. It does not push us into crisis. It does not force a reckoning. It simply allows us to drift while time moves relentlessly forward. By the time the consequences of comfort become obvious, significant opportunities have already passed. Careers plateau, relationships stagnate, and aspirations fade. All because comfort felt easier than the effort required to grow. The antidote to comfort is deliberate action. It is awareness, courage, and the willingness to embrace temporary tension in the service of long-term growth. To counter comfort, you must continuously question your habits, your decisions, and your assumptions. You must ask yourself, am I choosing this because it is best for my growth, or because it is easiest in the moment? Am I challenging myself to expand my capabilities, or simply maintaining the status quo? Am I willing to risk discomfort for a life that matters? Choosing growth over comfort is not a single act. It is a series of small, intentional decisions made daily. It is the decision to say yes to opportunities that scare you. It is the decision to push beyond what you have already mastered. It is the decision to be curious, to learn, and to adapt. It is the decision to move even when conditions are imperfect, even when fear is present, and even when the easy choice is tempting. These choices compound over time. They create momentum. They differentiate the people who achieve meaningful results from those who merely survive. The reality is that comfort may feel safe, but it is not neutral. It either propels you forward when used intentionally or holds you back when relied upon unconsciously. It is a choice. You can choose comfort and accept the hidden cost it imposes, or you can choose discomfort and embrace the growth it guarantees. But you cannot have both. You cannot drift comfortably and still reach extraordinary outcomes. Those who succeed in life understand this. They embrace discomfort not because they enjoy it, but because they understand its value. They know that the tension between where they are and where they want to be is the signal that they are on the right path. They do not avoid challenge. They welcome it as a necessary step toward achievement. They do not mistake ease for progress. And they do not allow temporary comfort to dictate permanent outcomes. In the end, comfort is a decision. It is the choice to prioritize ease over growth, convenience over courage, and stability over potential. And that choice defines your life, often more than any other factor. The people who choose discomfort, even when it is hard, even when it is inconvenient, and even when it is uncertain, are the people who create the lives they dream of. They are the people who refuse to settle for average. They are the people who understand that in a rapidly changing world, comfort is the enemy of progress, and that only through intentional discomfort can greatness be achieved. So recognize comfort for what it is. Do not be seduced by its temporary pleasure. Do not mistake ease for success. Do not allow the quiet safety of routine to mask the silent erosion of potential. Growth, purpose, and meaning exist on the other side of discomfort. And the sooner you embrace it, the sooner you stop being average and start becoming the person you are capable of becoming. Most people fail not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they settle. They accept what is easy, predictable, and comfortable, and they call it reality. They look around at their environment, at the people they interact with, at the jobs they hold, and they tell themselves, this is good enough. They convince themselves that stability and predictability are safer than risk and ambition. But settling is not safe. Settling is a silent trap. It quietly narrows your horizons, limits your potential, and ensures that you live a life smaller than you were capable of creating. The world is full of people who have settled. They go through routines that feel comfortable. They choose mediocrity over effort, convenience over discipline, and complacency over courage. They settle because it is easier than the discomfort required to grow. They settle because they fear the unknown, because they fear failure, because they fear rejection. They settle because it is easier to be good enough than to risk being exceptional. And while settling may feel like safety in the short term, it is destructive in the long term. Settling is the ultimate form of self-deception. It disguises itself as practicality, realism, and patience. People tell themselves, I'll do more later, or this is what I can handle right now. They assume that there will be another opportunity, another chance, another window to act, but time is relentless. It does not wait. The longer you settle, the further you drift from your potential. The longer you wait for the perfect moment, the more you miss the moments that are perfect because of action, not because of timing. Most people fail because they are unwilling to confront the discomfort required to move beyond their current circumstances. Growth is never convenient. It requires effort, reflection, and sometimes sacrifice. It requires pushing past the familiar and entering a space where success is uncertain. And most people are unwilling to do that because settling feels safer than trying and failing. But in truth, settling is a slow failure. It may not feel like defeat today, but it guarantees mediocrity over time. The danger of settling is that it becomes a habit. When you settle once, it becomes easier to settle again. One compromise leads to another. One good enough decision compounds into a pattern of good enough living. And before you know it, your aspirations, your goals, and your potential are quietly replaced by routines and expectations that never challenged you. Settling is rarely dramatic. It is incremental. It sneaks in through decisions that feel harmless, then accumulates into a life that is quietly less than what it could have been. People often think they lose because of circumstances. They blame their environment, their upbringing, or the opportunities they were given. But the truth is, settling is a choice. It is a conscious or unconscious decision to accept the familiar over the possible, to embrace comfort over challenge, to prioritize immediate ease over long-term fulfillment. It is not external forces that limit most people. It is their willingness to settle for less. When you settle, you give up control of your life. You allow external conditions to define your possibilities. You wait for validation, approval, or circumstances to change, rather than taking ownership of your growth. And in a world that rewards initiative, patience without action is not a virtue, it is a liability. Waiting for the right time, the perfect situation, or the ideal condition is a form of settling. The people who create extraordinary lives understand that there is no perfect time. There is only the time you make perfect through action, courage, and persistence. Settling also limits your imagination. When you accept the status quo, you stop exploring what is possible. You stop asking the hard questions. You stop challenging yourself to think differently, to learn more, and to stretch further. You convince yourself that the current state of affairs is all you can achieve, and in doing so, you limit your own vision. True growth requires imagination. It requires the ability to see beyond the obvious, to envision what could be, and to act boldly to make that vision real. Settling kills that imagination. It replaces possibility with predictability, risk with routine, and growth with stasis. One of the most insidious aspects of settling is how it masquerades as prudence. People say, "I'm being realistic," or "I'm being practical." But there is a difference between being strategic and being complacent. Strategic choices are informed by ambition, purpose, and vision. Complacent choices are informed by fear, convenience, and avoidance. Settling is often justified with logic, but the logic is flawed. Choosing comfort, predictability, and ease over challenge, innovation, and growth may feel rational in the moment, but it always comes at the expense of long-term potential. The people who refuse to settle understand that failure is not the enemy. Failure is feedback. Discomfort is not a signal to retreat. It is a signal to advance. The challenge is not to avoid struggle, but to embrace it intentionally, to learn from it, and to allow it to transform you. Settling avoids struggle at the expense of transformation. Growth embraces struggle because transformation requires risk, effort, and courage. Settling may protect you from short-term pain, but it guarantees long-term regret. Settling is not only a personal problem, it is contagious. When you settle, you influence those around you. You normalize mediocrity. You reduce expectations. You create an environment where good enough becomes acceptable for everyone. And that is one of the most dangerous aspects of settling. It not only limits your life, but also lowers the standards for those you interact with. Leadership, influence, and impact require resisting the temptation to settle. They require setting a standard higher than convenience and comfort, a standard that inspires others to rise as well. The antidote to settling is intentionality. It requires asking difficult questions daily. Am I choosing this beck? As it serves my growth or because it feels safe? Am I challenging myself to improve, or am I maintaining the status quo? Am I accepting less than I am capable of achieving because of fear or convenience? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. They force reflection. They demand honesty. They require courage, and courage is the essential element that separates those who settle from those who thrive. Growth does not happen by accident. Extraordinary lives are not the product of luck or circumstance. They are the result of deliberate decisions made consistently over time. Those decisions are often small, incremental, and difficult. They require saying no to convenience, no to comfort, and yes to challenge. They require setting higher standards, seeking continuous improvement, and refusing to accept the path of least resistance. Settling, by contrast, is passive. It requires no decision, no courage, and no reflection. It simply happens when you fail to act with intention. To stop settling, you must embrace discomfort as a companion, not an enemy. You must understand that challenge, risk, and effort are the currency of growth. You must recognize that every time you choose convenience over courage, you are choosing limitation over possibility, and you must commit daily to refusing to accept a life smaller than what you are capable of creating. Ultimately, settling is a choice, and it is a choice with consequences. It shapes your career, your relationships, your personal growth, and your impact on the world. It defines whether your life will be a series of predictable routines or a journey of continuous exploration, learning, and fulfillment. Those who refuse to settle understand that life rewards those who act with intention, embrace discomfort, and aim higher than the minimum. Settling, no matter how comfortable it feels, is no longer an option if you want to live fully, meaningfully, and extraordinarily. The decision is yours. To settle is to accept a life of quiet regret. To resist settling is to embrace a life of growth, purpose, and impact. The choice may feel difficult. The discomfort may feel intense, and the path may feel uncertain, but it is the only path that leads to fulfillment. Settling may be tempting, but it is the ultimate betrayal of potential. And in a world that moves as fast as ours, you simply cannot afford to settle anymore. Your standards are the invisible architecture of your life. They shape your decisions, influence your habits, and determine the trajectory of your future. Most people underestimate just how powerful this is. They think standards are about rules, regulations, or expectations set by someone else. But your standards are far more profound. They are the compass by which you navigate your life, the baseline against which you measure what you accept and what you refuse, the unspoken agreements you make with yourself about what is possible. Standards define your normal. They silently dictate what you tolerate in relationships, work, health, and personal growth. If your standard is low, you will consistently accept mediocrity. If your standard is high, you will consistently push toward excellence. What we often fail to realize is that life doesn't correct itself. Life doesn't automatically reward potential, talent, or good intentions. Life rewards consistency, action, and the quality of your decisions. And the quality of your decisions is dictated by the standards you hold. Every choice you make is filtered through the lens of your standards, whether you realize it or not. When you decide what is acceptable, what is tolerable, and what is off limits, you are not just making a momentary decision. You are shaping the ecosystem of your life. The people you interact with, the opportunities you pursue, the habits you form, and the challenges you are willing to face all flow from the standards you set for yourself. If your standards are weak, you will consistently drift toward the path of least resistance. If your standards are strong, you will consistently push toward growth, purpose, and meaning. Most people do not take the time to define their standards because it feels uncomfortable. It requires reflection, honesty, and sometimes the courage to confront the ways in which we have been settling. It forces you to ask questions you may not like the answers to. Am I accepting less than I am capable of achieving? Am I tolerating behaviors or circumstances that diminish me? Am I pushing myself to the level of excellence I am capable of reaching? Or am I coasting on convenience and comfort? These questions are difficult because they demand accountability, and accountability is uncomfortable, but it is essential. The consequences of weak standards are subtle but powerful. Weak standards allow compromise to become habit. They create a life defined by reactive decisions rather than intentional choices. They allow circumstances, other people's expectations, and fleeting convenience to dictate your path. And over time, weak standards compound into regret, frustration, and unrealized potential. The tragedy is that most people don't notice until much later. By the time they do, the patterns are entrenched, and the cost of reversing course becomes higher. High standards, on the other hand, shape a life of intention. They create boundaries that protect your time, energy, and focus. They influence your habits, guide your relationships, and clarify your priorities. They make decisions easier because you have a clear benchmark against which to measure options. When standards are defined, life becomes less about reacting to circumstance and more about creating a reality you want. You start to notice opportunities that align with your values and dismiss those that don't. You begin to attract people, experiences, and opportunities that reflect the quality of the standards you hold. Standards are not about perfection. They are about direction. They are not rigid rules that make life inflexible, but rather principles that provide clarity and focus. High standards give you a framework for making decisions under pressure, for staying consistent when distractions arise, and for resisting the temptation to settle. They are the internal compass that guides behavior even when external conditions are uncertain or chaotic. Without standards, you drift. With standards, you navigate. One of the most powerful aspects of standards is how they influence behavior unconsciously. When you elevate your standards, your daily actions begin to reflect that elevation. You become more disciplined because you refuse to accept shortcuts. You become more selective in the people you spend time with because you refuse to accept influence that diminishes your growth. You become more intentional in your work because you refuse to accept mediocrity in outcomes. Standards shape behavior not through force, but through expectation. They create an internal structure that guides choices naturally. Without constant self-criticism or debate, your standards also determine the boundaries of your potential. What you tolerate today becomes your baseline tomorrow. If you accept minimal effort, inconsistent results, or toxic environments, you train yourself to expect and tolerate the same in the future. But if you demand excellence, integrity, and continuous improvement, you train yourself to reach higher and stretch further. Standards are cumulative. They compound over time, shaping not only immediate decisions, but also long-term outcomes. Small compromises today create limitations tomorrow, while small commitments to higher standards today create momentum that propels you forward. The challenge is that maintaining high standards is not easy. It requires courage to reject the easy, convenient, or popular choice. It requires discipline to act consistently when results are not immediate. It requires self-awareness to recognize when your behavior or choices fall short. And it requires resilience to persist in the face of resistance, criticism, or temptation. High standards are not comfortable. They are demanding, and that is precisely why they work. The life you want will not be created through convenience, shortcuts, or mediocrity. It will be created through the consistent application of high standards. It is also essential to recognize that standards are contagious. When you raise your standards, you elevate the expectations of those around you. You inspire others to rise to the level you have set. Your friends, colleagues, and even strangers begin to notice the quality of your commitment, discipline, and choices. By holding yourself to higher standards, you create an environment in which excellence becomes the norm. Conversely, weak standards normalize mediocrity and reinforce low expectations. Your life is both a reflection and a projection of the standards you hold. High standards are the invisible architecture of achievement. They are not flashy. They do not attract immediate attention. But over time, they define outcomes. They shape opportunities, relationships, and experiences. They determine how much you grow, how far you reach, and how deeply you impact the world. Standards are not about what you do in a moment. They are about what you accept over a lifetime. And that is why they matter more than talent, luck, or circumstance. Ultimately, your standards are a declaration of your potential. They tell the world and more, importantly yourself, what you are willing to accept, what you are unwilling to tolerate, and the level of effort, integrity, and excellence you are committed to embodying. They are a daily commitment to refuse mediocrity, to demand growth, and to pursue a life that aligns with your highest aspirations. They are the bridge between who you are today and who you are capable of becoming. So, take a moment to examine your standards, reflect on what you accept in your work, relationships, health, and personal growth. Ask yourself where compromise has crept in, where convenience has taken precedence over courage, and where low expectations have limited potential. And then decide to raise them, not once, but every day. Because the standards you hold today will define the life you live tomorrow. And if you refuse to raise them, you cannot expect to live beyond average. Excellence begins with the choices you make about what is acceptable and what is not. Everything else follows. Greatness is not an accident. It is not something you stumble upon, inherit, or discover by chance. Greatness is a choice, and that choice is made every single day. It is a choice to show up with intention, to act with courage, to refuse mediocrity, and to embrace the discomfort required to grow. Most people misunderstand what greatness is. They see it as a destination, a title, or a result. But greatness is not external, it is internal. It is the product of deliberate decisions, consistent effort, and unwavering commitment to a standard higher than the minimum. The first step toward greatness is understanding that it is a daily decision. It is not something you achieve once and then possess forever. Each morning, you are faced with choices that either move you closer to or further from your potential. Will you take the easy path, the comfortable path, or the path that challenges you? Will you live for good enough, or will you push for extraordinary? Will you follow the crowd, or will you lead yourself and others towards something meaningful? Every choice matters because greatness compounds over time. Small, intentional actions accumulate into results that, in retrospect, seem inevitable, but only because someone made the choice to act consistently when others did not. Most people fail to achieve greatness because they wait for permission. They wait for the perfect opportunity, the right mentor, the ideal circumstances. They think, I'll pursue excellence when conditions are favorable. But life rarely gives perfect conditions. Waiting ensures that greatness remains a dream rather than a reality. The people who achieve remarkable outcomes understand that they cannot control every variable. They cannot wait for circumstances to align perfectly. What they can control is their commitment to choose courage over comfort, action over passivity, and growth over stagnation. Greatness begins with the decision to act even when conditions are imperfect. Greatness is also about refusing to settle. Settling feels safe. It is comfortable. It allows you to avoid risk, criticism, and failure. But settling is the enemy of potential. When you settle, you trade what you are capable of for what is convenient. You accept the familiar instead of the possible. You allow fear to dictate your choices rather than vision. Settling may protect you in the short term, but it guarantees mediocrity in the long term. Greatness demands that you reject the status quo and consistently push beyond the boundaries of what is easy or expected. It demands that you embrace challenge as the fuel for transformation. Discipline is the foundation of greatness. Talent alone is never enough. Opportunity alone is never enough. Discipline, the willingness to do what is necessary even when you do not feel like it, is what separates those who achieve extraordinary results from those who drift through life. Discipline is not glamorous. It is repetitive, sometimes uncomfortable, and often invisible to the outside world. But it builds momentum. It creates resilience. It establishes habits that reinforce excellence. Greatness is not achieved through bursts of effort. It is achieved through sustained, intentional action that aligns with your values and goals. Another essential element of greatness is vision. You cannot achieve what you cannot see. Vision is not merely a goal, it is a clear, compelling picture of what you are striving to create. Vision provides direction when the path is uncertain. Vision motivates when obstacles appear. Vision clarifies priorities when distractions abound. Without vision, effort is scattered, decisions are inconsistent, and potential is squandered. Those who choose greatness commit to defining their vision and then aligning every action with that vision, even when it requires sacrifice and perseverance. Courage is inseparable from greatness. Courage is the willingness to face fear, criticism, and uncertainty in pursuit of what matters. It is not the absence of fear, it is action despite fear. Most people avoid discomfort, disagreement, or risk because it feels unsafe. But greatness demands courage. It requires speaking up when it is easier to remain silent, taking initiative when waiting would be safer, and acting on conviction when convenience tempts compromise. Courage is the vehicle through which vision becomes reality. Without courage, potential remains dormant and intention becomes inertia. Greatness also requires a long-term mindset. Many people are obsessed with instant results, recognition, and validation. They confuse immediate gratification with success. But greatness is rarely instant. It is the product of patience, perseverance, and sustained effort. It is built brick by brick, choice by choice, and day by day. Those who choose greatness understand that the discomfort of today is an investment in the results of tomorrow. They embrace delayed gratification because they know that extraordinary outcomes are rarely the result of short-term convenience. Consistency is another non-negotiable aspect of greatness. One extraordinary effort does not define a life. One act of courage does not create legacy. Greatness is created when intentional choices are repeated, when effort becomes habitual, and when principles guide behavior, regardless of circumstance. Consistency builds credibility, trust, and momentum. It compounds over time, creating results that, when viewed from the outside, appear effortless. But the reality is that consistent effort is deliberate, persistent, and disciplined. Accountability is crucial in the pursuit of greatness. To achieve extraordinary results, you must hold yourself to standards higher than the minimum. You must evaluate your choices, confront your excuses, and take responsibility for outcomes rather than blame circumstances or others. Accountability is uncomfortable because it forces honesty. It requires reflection, acknowledgement of mistakes, and correction of course. But without accountability, greatness is impossible. Without it, potential is wasted, and effort is misdirected. Those who achieve remarkable results understand that accountability is not punishment. It is liberation. It frees you from self-deception and propels you toward the life you are capable of creating. Greatness is rarely solitary. While it begins with personal choice, it is amplified through relationships, influence, and leadership. Those who choose greatness inspire others to rise with them. They create environments where excellence is expected, courage is modeled, and potential is nurtured. Leadership is not about authority. It is about raising the standard for yourself and others. Greatness attracts greatness. By committing to your own potential, you influence those around you, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond your individual actions. Finally, greatness requires resilience. Failure, setbacks, and obstacles are inevitable. The pursuit of excellence is not a straight path. It is full of resistance, uncertainty, and challenge. The difference between those who achieve greatness and those who give up is resilience. The ability to endure difficulty, learn from mistakes, and continue moving forward with purpose. Resilience is not innate. It is cultivated through experience, reflection, and intentional growth. Greatness is not defined by avoiding adversity. It is defined by how you respond to it. In the end, choosing greatness is not about being perfect. It is not about achieving more than others or seeking recognition. It is about refusing to settle for average, about living intentionally, and about committing to the highest version of yourself. Greatness is the result of daily choices to act with courage, discipline, consistency, and vision. It is the product of resisting comfort, embracing challenge, and holding yourself accountable to standards higher than convenience. It is built through patience, persistence, and resilience over time. Greatness is available to anyone willing to choose it. It does not require extraordinary circumstances, inherent talent, or external validation. It requires awareness, intention, and the courage to act consistently in alignment with your values and vision. Every decision you make either moves you closer to or further from greatness. The path is never easy. It is rarely comfortable, but it is the only path that leads to a life of meaning, purpose, and impact. The choice is yours. You can drift, settle, and accept mediocrity, or you can act. You can choose courage over comfort, effort over ease, and growth over stagnation. You can make the daily decisions that over time compound into extraordinary outcomes. Greatness is not waiting for you. It is waiting for your commitment. It is waiting for you to refuse average, to rise above convenience, and to embrace the life you are capable of creating. Every day is an opportunity to choose greatness, and those who seize it understand why average is no longer an option. The truth is simple. Average is no longer safe. The world has changed, the pace of life has accelerated, and opportunities no longer wait for those who are complacent. Comfort, Routine and mediocrity may feel secure in the moment, but they come at an invisible cost. The cost of potential left unrealized, dreams unfulfilled, and influence unclaimed. Average is no longer neutral. It is a slow, silent force that guarantees you fall behind while the world moves forward. You cannot afford to drift through life, waiting for perfect conditions, ideal timing, or external validation. Waiting ensures you remain average because life rewards action, not hesitation. Every choice you make either pulls you closer to your potential or reinforces the patterns that keep you stagnant. The people who succeed in extraordinary ways do not rely on luck, circumstance, or talent alone. They act with intention. They refuse to settle for comfort when growth requires discomfort. They embrace challenges when others shy away. They persist when obstacles appear. They understand that greatness is not a gift. It is a decision made consistently day after day. Your standards define the life you live. What you tolerate becomes your normal. If you accept mediocrity in your work, relationships, and personal growth, that will define the limits of your life. But if you raise your standards, demand more from yourself, and refuse to accept less than your best, your life changes. Standards create boundaries that protect your energy, focus, and purpose. They shape your daily habits, your decisions, and ultimately your destiny. They are not about perfection. They are about direction, clarity, and intentionality. The choices you make now, guided by the standards you hold, will compound over time into outcomes that determine whether you remain average or rise to extraordinary levels of achievement. Greatness is a choice. It is not about being flawless. It is not about being the most talented, and it is not about having the easiest path. Greatness is about showing up, making deliberate choices, and refusing to settle for less than you are capable of achieving. It is about embracing discomfort as a companion rather than an enemy. It is about acting with courage when fear is present, maintaining discipline when motivation wanes, and holding yourself accountable even when no one is watching. Greatness is the result of persistence, intention, and a refusal to let circumstances or comfort dictate your life. If you continue to settle for average, you are choosing a life of quiet regret. You are choosing predictability over growth, ease over purpose, and convenience over courage. But if you refuse average, you step into a different reality, a reality where progress replaces hesitation, where action replaces waiting, and where potential transforms into achievement. You begin to live intentionally, act consistently, and hold yourself accountable to the highest version of who you can become. The choice is yours. You can drift, you can settle, and you can accept the life that is comfortable but limited. Or you can choose to rise, to act with courage, to raise your standards, and to embrace the challenges that create extraordinary results. Average is no longer an option. The world is moving too fast, expectations are rising too quickly, and the cost of inaction is too high. Your future depends on the decisions you make today. Step forward intentionally, refuse to settle, and commit to the life you are meant to live. Choose growth, choose Cora, choose excellence, and choose to never be average again.